Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Hello. Mark, something about you before I start about Level 42 itself. I believe one time fastest milkman in the West, known to churn out the odd bass line or so. You started out as a drummer, then eventually moved on to other instruments, and by some sheer fluke you found yourself playing bass. It seems like you had a very confused childhood about you, as with regards to equipment you want to play. You really hadn't decided which instrument you wanted to play. So how come you played the bass these days?
Well, it's really not as confusing as all that. The thing is that when I was 9 years old, my father bought me a drum kit, which I played until I was 20. I really thought I was going to be a great drummer. When I came to London when I was 20 years old, the only job I could get was in a music shop that didn't sell any drums. So I lied to get the job and said I could play bass, which was a bit embarrassing, but it did sort of force my hand to start playing bass. I mean, even then I still wanted to be a drummer, but then when Level 42 started in 1980, Phil, the drummer, was a better drummer than me, so, and as he could only play drums and I'd been practicing bass, I decided to play bass. So really I sort of started when the band started playing bass, and the way that I played bass was like drumming on the bass, if you like, which is how I developed the style of slap that I've sort of got a name for these days. But it's good, eh? Lucky break. That's what I think.
Are you actually amazed how, say, your popularity as a bass player?
I am, yeah. It's very strange because, like I said, I never really wanted to. And even now, I'm not sort of totally into being a bass player. I like, when I did my solo album, I played drums on that, and I had much more fun doing that. I think it's something about, if you have to get up in front of people and play, it's always nice to be sat behind something in case they start throwing things. So it is very strange, I think, that people have sort of got into the bass the way they have. But once again, I'm really pleased.
I suppose having the ability to play all these instruments gives you a sort of an edge on a producer's instinct. It sort of highlights that sort of effect when you're going to the studios or working with somebody else.
I think that perhaps the edge it gives you is maybe not so much from production, but in fact perhaps songwriting, because it gives you a much better perspective of the roles that instruments play within the thing. That therefore, if I was to come up with an idea, for example, for Mike to play keyboard-wise, which I don't often do, I hasten to add, at least it makes you aware of the register that keyboards would sound good in, or, for example, a guitar would sound good in. I think that perhaps that's the greatest gift that conductors have in orchestras, or composers for orchestras, is that they have a knowledge of writing for an instrument a particular line or passage that suits that instrument, as opposed to, say, like giving a piccolo part to a trombone. It wouldn't sound the same or have the same effect, you know.
I suppose also, having been voted many times as the best bass player, when you get together with your band, I don't suppose your presence there would be as dominating on the other people in the band. I suppose it's all equal share.
Very much so. It's I mean, Level 42 is a band. It's certainly a band, and everybody has their input. Phil, Boone, and Mike. They, like I said, if I do take an idea to them, I certainly don't tell them what to do. I say, look, I've got this, and it goes like this, and I'll play them a cassette of it, and invariably they improve on what I thought of in the first place. And everybody has their input. That way, it keeps it fresh and makes it interesting for everybody. And I mean, it's certainly not a case of that nobody's sort of inspired or put off by the fact that I've got a reputation as being a good bass player. I mean, it's great. And in fact, it's very nice. I don't think I'd like it if I thought that everybody was sat there waiting for me to keep doing fantastic things in the group. That'd be terrible. As it is, they just treat it as, well, thank God someone in the band's getting some notoriety somewhere.
Yes, I suppose more than anything else, really, these days, as opposed to being known as the world's greatest bass player or whatever, you're primarily concerned about the songs and actually being known as a composer as opposed to being a musician.
Absolutely. On the new album that we've done, World Machine, if anything, the bass has taken a bit of a back seat, But it's certainly not because I'm sick of playing bass, but it's very important to do what is right for the song and what the song demands. It wouldn't do for me to to slap around all over the place behind certain love songs that are on the album, for example. There's a song called Leaving Me Now, which, I could be Herbie Flowers for all anybody knows. Not that I don't like Herbie Flowers, of course, a nice boy, but there are slight differences. But I do what's best for the song, and if you don't do that, if you don't respect the music for what it is and what the music demands of you, then I think you start getting very confused songs.
Of course, we all know what your role was on your solo album Influences. You basically performed on all the tracks, with the exception of one or two guests coming in. But with the new album, World Machine, what role are you taking there, aside from being a bass player and the occasional vocalist?
Well, I think producer probably is my biggest contribution to the album. I mean, I mixed all the songs as well with Julian Mendelssohn, and it was an arrangement that we came to. Julian Mendelssohn engineered the album, and before we went in to record it, as this was the first thing that Level 42 and Wally Battery were going to produce together, we had to make it clear that one thing that doesn't really work is to have everybody in on a mix, because there has to be someone at the helm of the thing, if you like, keeping a direction and a course through. So we decided that before we went in that I would do the mixing on the album and shape it the way that you hear it now. For me, I think mixing is probably the most creative point of the recording process, because everything else beforehand can be very considered and done. Whereas mixing, it's like you're not just concentrating on your instrument or your instrument sound. You're concentrating on the song as a whole, and you have to really step back and hear this and hope that, the very fact that there's a very nice line going on behind here, but since we've put the vocals on, it's almost become redundant. You have to forgo the guitarist's feeling that I can't hear that bit anymore, and you have to say, well, I'm sorry, but it was a clashing concept here. The song sounds good to me, and so that's how it was done.
Am I right in assuming that maybe one of the thoughts that you had recently about Level 42 and your partner in the band was, I've had enough of the flash bass playing, and really what I want to get down to is to be known primarily as I said before, a good composer, songwriter, and also maybe you achieve more credibility in that vein as a songwriter, songs coming out of the radio, as opposed to here is Mark King playing 3,000 bass lines for you.
Well, I mean, I've said in a couple of interviews, not a million years ago, that is important to me. I think that it's almost as if if you play an instrument well, it's not an astounding thing. People expect you to play an instrument well. The fact that Elvis Presley wasn't a fantastic guitarist didn't stop him standing up there and strumming it, and it became part of the thing. People expected him. They didn't expect him to be fantastic. However, if you get up and you play an instrument really well, people expect it of you, and it's nothing. But the real lasting thing is, the Lennon and McCartney syndrome, actual strength in songs, great music that will carry on and is always going to, remain timeless. It sounds like, I don't think I've done that. I'm not even sure that I will ever do that. But I'd certainly like to try and do that, because I think that is the best thing that you can do in music, is have something that is lasting and carries on. And, I say with some pride that the band has never become a faddish band or lent itself to moving with trends, because at the end of the day, I think you give yourself such a short lifespan, because people get sick up on the formula that's created that way.
Yes, I suppose also, in a way, no disrespect intended on your previous albums, but to me, this last album, World Machine, when you compare it, say, to the previous album, True Colours almost sounds mediocre compared to this. It really has been such a progression.
Oh, thank you.
Whether that happened, because it's very much the same lineup, and of course with the fifth invisible member.
Sure, Wally. Yeah.
So Badarou.
The Invisible Wally.
Invisible Wally. You've created something which I think is a gem.
Thank you very much. I'm really pleased. I don't know what to say. Did you buy it?
I would buy it.
Okay, thank you. I'm really glad you liked the album. The thing is that we did take a bit of a chance on this because whereas if you compare, say, the songs on this album with the Hot Water track that we did last year, which I like very much and did the band very good, I think that the point is that Hot Water was like a hit over the head sort of song, and it was a good dance floor song. Whereas this one, we did run the risk of, if you like, cutting off some of the hardcore fans that we had in the past because it seemed different. The reason that the album is perhaps stronger song-wise is that we did a lot of pre-production on this for the first time. We spent January and February of this year at my home. I just have an 8-track demo studio, and we did concentrate. Wally Bader came across for 2 weeks and wrote with me, and we concentrated on making sure that we had songs that we could go in and record. Like, it starts here and it finishes here, and it's complete. And that's what we did, because there's really very, very little editing on this to make songs up. Whereas in the past, we sort of rattled on for about 10 minutes on a track and hacked it about to try and fit it on an album, and we didn't do it this time.
One noticeable thing, of course, on the new album is that there isn't the presence of a well-known producer. I mean, there's, of course, yourselves. You've gained a name as a producer recently, but what I mean is an outside producer, whereas before you tended to go for producers. The previous album used Ken Scott.
That's right, yeah.
And some of the old ones, Mike Vernon.
Well, it's been very much a case of learning. I mean, if you think that the band's been together 5 years, that sounds like a long time. It is a long time. But then in that 5 years, we've done 6 albums. And 6 albums is not a lot of time to get experience in recording on. If you imagine that the very first album I ever recorded was with Level 42, and here we are now, we're on our 6th one, that's not a lot of experience in studios to learn how to make records, to come off the street and make a great sounding record. So it was very important, and we owe a great debt to one, Mike Vernon, to the Larry Dunn and Verdine White from Earth, Wind and Fire, and also Ken Scott. And the reasons for using these guys was because of the experience they've had. And we could sort of use their experience and watch and learn. When we're in the studio, I spent a great deal of time sort of on their shoulder, watching what they were doing, what they were listening for. Because at the end of the day, it's like your ears. That's what happens. But then you have to know how to put that into magnetic information on the tape in the first place. And we thought that this time, we'd have a go at producing it ourselves because we know what we want. And with an engineer as experienced as Julian Mendelsohn, who's, he's notorious for doing 12 inches of the Frankie Goes to Hollywood stuff, Go West, Kate Bush, he's just done. He's a very, very good engineer. And with him at the controls and us saying, no, I don't really think it should be like this. I really think it should be like this, Julian. And the guy knows how to go and do it. The measure of him as a good engineer was the fact that nothing took any time to do. To get a vocal sound, it was there, done and there, because I think that Julian, in just meeting us and working with us on putting the backing tracks down, knew the way that we were. And that's the sort of thing that is invaluable.
Yes, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed on this album is you've emerged more as a vocalist here. And also, from the conversations I had with you earlier, you have become perhaps a little bit more technically minded, as you say. You're more of an astute young engineer yourself as well. So I suppose that gives you the fully fledged experience that one needs to have in the studio these days, after 5 albums or 6 albums, as you say. Now you can go literally and with ease and comfort and create something at leisure and at your own time, I suppose.
Yeah, once again, I say that there's sort of nothing compares with experience in doing it. And I mean, even now, of course, we're still learning. I really wouldn't like to say that I could go and rub shoulders with Quincy Jones or anything like that. Certainly not. I mean, imagine his experience, and look at the dividends it's paid off. Any guy that can survive in the business to the successful extent that he has done and still turn out, last year or the year before, Thriller, and make it like the biggest selling album of all time. I mean, that's just phenomenal. And there's a reason for that, It sounds fantastic. It is amazingly produced. I mean, there doesn't seem to be an awful lot of information on the records when you listen really hard. But then sometimes more is less.
Yes, I mean, let me ask you one question which is perhaps pointed towards you personally as opposed to the band. What keeps you from taking your bass going to LA, introducing yourself to Quincy Jones, because I mean, obviously he must have heard your stuff. If not, you'll soon get him to listen to it. And having that sort of lucrative lifestyle, because I'm pretty sure you'll end up on you'll be a very highly paid session man, probably earning billions of more money than you ever do now.
Well, I hope not at the end of the day. It's like I've done some guest work with friends of mine that I've met in the past recently. I played on the Nick Kershaw album and recently on the Midge album. And I've done some work for Martin Russian, a producer over here. But these are people that I've met and genuinely get on with. I did a session recently for a guy here that probably isn't known outside of these shores, Alexi Sale. But Chaz Jankel, who from the Blockheads, who does all the music for him, it was very nice. I wanted to work with him. At the same time, I don't particularly want to spread the sound so far, so diversified on different records that everyone gets sick of hearing me playing and stuff. I mean, there's certainly enough people that are starting to sound like me anyway now. And having said that, at the end of the day, Level 42 is like my band, and that's my project. For however long it carries on, I want to be there and sort of controlling it.
Yes, points taken on that one, and I'm pretty sure that eventually you would benefit out of that. One thing I thought recently was on the songs that you've actually co-wrote here, who's the main lyric writer on these?
I suppose now, certainly on the album, the main lyricist is Phil Gould, although his brother Boone Gould also writes a lot of lyrics and has written another song that doesn't appear on the album, which is only on the cassette and the CD, called Dream Crazy. But Boone's developing as a very good lyricist. Phil's lyrics I like a lot, but we have had criticism in the past that perhaps they're inaccessible to most people. Phil sort of writes very much from his experiences, which in the early days posed problems for me, because if I hadn't known him so well, I too would have said, I really don't know what you're talking about, let alone be able to sing it with a degree of feeling. However, his once again experience, his writing now, he knows what words sound good when I sing them. I mean, you wouldn't believe how hard it is. There are some words that are impossible to sing well, that sound good. So the task of a lyricist, I think, is a pretty unenviable one. I just like to get on with the music.
One day I was talking to Phil Collins, and he said Tony Banks came up with a lyric at the end of the line, I think it was orange, and he found it very difficult to put emotion on the word orange. So as a first,
Yeah, it is. It's a funny thing that there are lots of words which I can't think of at the moment. But I always seem to like ending songs with E-sounding words. I don't know why, but it seems to suit my voice.
World Machine. There is a theme going through it, isn't there? I mean, basically, what I gather from this album, whoever wrote the majority of the lyrics, as you said, probably Boone did. They are sad lyrics in many ways. And, I mean, not looking at the front cover itself, I don't know, could be Sex Machine for all I know.
Yeah, it's a little phallic, isn't it?
You tell me what you feel about this.
Well, the thing, sort of, in a lyrical context, Phil, who was the main lyricist, is very much, is a very socially, what can I say, perhaps not socially aware, but is socially concerned about the environment and other countries and things. It's always been our stance that I don't really see the point in us keep singing one-to-one situation songs about, look, I love her and she loves me and everything's happy. That doesn't always work all the time. A lot of people do this, and invariably it's sad that most successful commercial songs that go top 10 sing about this kind of thing. It's a breath of fresh air when you hear someone like Kate Bush with Running Up That Hill, which is, I think that's a great lyric. Struggling, pushing, trying to find. And this is something that if you put yourself on a platform, I think you not only owe it to yourself, but you owe it to people who are listening to stand up and say something of worth, not something that they probably already know.
From the time you actually start writing songs to the time you get into the studio, put them on tape, eventually vinyl and getting released, there's always a gap of nearly a year. or thereabouts from the time you actually start. You always got to keep ahead in times. I mean, you can't create something which, in a year's time is going to be yesterday's sound. I heard Quincy Jones, to quote the man again, saying that that's one thing that he did with the Brothers Johnson earlier on, and that he tried to see what the market, or virtually what the new sounds are going to be like, and create something for himself. And I suppose with you, the obvious step that I could have seen you taking was the electro, bop and hip-hop, which you were very interested in at one point. But of course, I mean, you totally surprised me with this album, because it seemed to have been a natural progression from the last album to go into that field, but instead you came with an album of simply good songs.
I think that getting back to what I said earlier about like giving yourself a formula to work to, i.e. if Hot Water was a hit for us, to come out with another 3 Hot Waters on this album would have been commercially fine for this year. Who would have wanted to know us next year? That's sort of one thing that is always important to bear in mind. Having said that, it's not that complicated, really. The songs that we've written on this album were just songs that we liked. We began with 24 ideas for songs that we gradually stripped back to 15 that we would like to record, and eventually only recorded 10 of them because we liked them the best. And it's as simple as that, really. I think that, you have to remember that when a band starts, it starts on its own merits. They invariably, the musicians involved, the members of the band, play what they like to play. They don't play what they're told to play or think they have to play because of any business move or anything. You do what you like to do. And then if you're successful, well, that's fantastic. I think a lot of people tend to forget that they were taken in the first place. What made them interesting was music that they like to do personally. And we've kept to that. We're doing that particularly on this album, I just hope it's successful at the end of the day, because if it's not, that it can be awfully defeating mentally. You think, well, I really don't know where to turn now, because while I do have an obligation to fulfill for the record company, they're in business. I'm in business too. Like, my obligation is to my wife and 2 daughters, to sort of keep feeding them. And if I'm having to do that, then, and this album doesn't go with music that I really like to do, then I've got problems.
One of the benefits that Level 42 has given you over the years is the opportunity to visit a few countries around the world, and one of them is Italy. Do you have any fond memories of the country, aside from having a nice dish of pasta or something like that?
When I was in Italy, I stayed for about 2 months in a town called Grosseto, which is on the west coast. It's quite in the north of Italy. And all I can remember, actually, is driving... Well, it's not all I can remember, but one of my nicest memories is driving along in fantastic weather on a scooter without a crash helmet on, with a guy that was like a friend of mine on the back of the bike. And we kept sort of scooting to this bay where a chap had a yacht that he used to let us go out with him sailing on. And I remember the colour of the water. It was almost turquoise. It was fantastic. I like Italy very much.
Italy in itself has produced many great singers over the years, and we've had to look at Mr. Caruso was one of them, etc., etc. Does that sort of music appeal to you at all? I mean, it is very much dimensioned towards Italy and perhaps the Latin.
Well, I mean, I have friends that find operatic singing very nice. For me personally, I'm afraid I hate it. I've never liked opera. I think it was because at school I was forced to play timpani in the orchestra and like hear all the teachers screaming their heads off on stage. It was terrible. It was too much of an ordeal, and so I think I tend to shut off from that. Music in schools, I think, is a strange situation. I don't know how it is in Italy, but in England, I don't think that they cater enough for the fact that pop music, if you like, electronic music, is the kids' music. They're the ones that make it, that buy it, and support the industry. And yet, all through my school life, I had to stand around the piano with everybody else, tapping 2 fingers on the palm of my hand, singing bloody silly songs that a monk had written in the 11th century. And I was sorely lacking. I mean, if I'd learnt then, if there'd been a course in studio engineering or sound or production techniques when I was at school, then I'd have been on my 90th album now and probably very rich. See, it's all the school's fault.
Yes. As a final question, as a modern day disciple of music, if I want to call it that, you go around the world laying your music onto people, various people around the world. Do you draw anything out of those countries, though, at all? I mean, is it just give? Do you take any?
Certainly, yes. I mean, we take back the appreciation of the people. I mean, just recently we've been in Spain and doing some festivals there for like between 7,500 and 10,000 people at a time. And it's just fantastic we were on with a band called the Bluebells, who play a very different kind of music than us. And I think it's fantastic when an audience can stand there and appreciate one sort of aspect of pop music and then in the next breath accept another one totally openly. I think perhaps I prefer European audiences for this reason above the British ones. In Britain we have a fantastic audience that are hardcore, that always come and see us. In Europe I think that it's different people come and see us every time, but take it very much on the merits of, God, these guys play well and they mean it. So we like it,
I hear that you are actually going to Italy, and there's obviously nothing like an Italian crowd at gigs. Have you any ideas when you're going in?
Yes, we're going to be doing a tour of Italy from the 10th to the 13th of December. It's not a very long time in Italy, but we're doing 4 shows, and I hope a lot of people will come along and see it and just have a good time.
Until then, arrivederci.
Arrivederci, Italy. See you in December.